What's up, guys? I thought I would do a quick video today describing what I think Tony Iommi used for gear back in the 70s and sort of what I've got going on in terms of a reproduction of that. You could see in a lot of my videos that I try to achieve that old Black Sabbath tone that Tony would have run back in the 70s, and it's taken me a long time to sort of learn everything he used in a very precise fashion, I guess. And to acquire some of that gear that's at least similar. I don't have exactly what he ran, but I have some stuff that's close. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about what I got and sort of what you need to really get that mid-70s Tony Iommi Black Sabbath tone. And it's actually fairly simple overall. So the first piece is the 1965 Gibson SG Special. This is a stock SG Special. It's an early 1965 with a wider nut. Inch and 11/16, and all stock P90s, which are really the critical part to the tone. I don't think you really need a 65 SG, but you do need a good set of vintage voiced P90s, so not overwound or anything, I don't think. And I've had some guitars with the newer, I've had newer guitars with newer P90s, and they don't quite sound the same. They don't quite have the same mid-rangey attack. I don't know, it's somewhat different, but these ones in this guitar read out at 8.55 k ohm in the bridge and 8.4 in the neck, and all the electronics are stock 500K pots. So that is the first piece of the puzzle, is just getting yourself a good SG with P90 pickups, not humbuckers. Tony switched to humbuckers around Never Say Die, Technical Ecstasy, when he switched to the John Birch guitar. But all the earlier records are just a Gibson SG Special with P90 pickups, in some chrome casings that John Birch put together. Second is this Laney LBO60 is what I've got. This is a 69 Laney LBO60, which stood for lead bass organ. I have a post phase inverter master volume installed on this thing in the back, and I run it on 110 volts, which I think there's two options. There's 220 or 110. And so in order to be able to run this on 110, you actually have to get a variac, because here in the US, the wall voltage is going to be 120 volts average. So in order to run it, I hook up this variac and drop the voltage to, you can probably see what ends up reading on a multimeter about 110 volts, so that I don't blow fuses, which I have done. The mains fuse in the back is swapped from a 2 amp to a 4 amp, and like I said, I've got a post phase inverter master volume installed on the back, which I got one of these old supergroup style knobs. And it helps me just be able to use the amp more, because if you really want to get supergroup cooking without any sort of master volume, it's got to be super loud. I mean, even if I run the master volume on 3 on this thing, even though it's only 60 watts, it's still really loud. So Tony used a LA100 LB lead bass, which is the 100-watt version, and they later changed the name to Supergroup. But all the circuits are basically the same, and so this is the amp. Basically, the tone settings for the Black Sabbath stuff are really simple. Basically, you plug into the high bass input here and crank all the knobs, presence, middle, treble, gain 1. You can crank gain 2 or leave it off, but you run the bass at 0. So that's what I've been doing, and then but I just set the master volume to taste. Obviously the amp sounds the best when it's just kind of wide open, but it's super loud. And with these P90s being somewhat microphonic, it kind of just feeds back massively, which you can always hear on the old Sabbath recordings. And that becomes even more of an issue really when you start running the one pedal that Tony ran, which it wasn't actually a pedal. It was a Dallas Arbiter Rangemaster that sat atop his amp, usually off to the side or behind. You rarely see it. But it's basically a Dallas Rangemaster treble booster, of which I've got several varieties. This is one by BSM called an RM Metal, which is voiced specifically for Tony's Rangemaster tone. You know, people say that you know, Tony ran a modified Rangemaster, or at least his Rangemaster was modified by one of his techs prior to Master of Reality. And generally, what I've found through experimentation with little, you know, kind of breadboard circuits and whatnot, is that going up on that input capacitance value, just slightly, from 0.0047 to something like microfarad to up to like 0.0068 or somewhere in the 0.009 range, something between what I've found 0.0047 and like 0.009 seems to give you a pretty good Sabbathy tone. I do prefer, when I'm running this Rangemaster by BSM, it's actually got quite a bit of gain, so you'll see that I run it sort of between, you know, not too high in the volume, that's minimum, you know, and I'm running it between here and there, and it goes all the way up to there, and which is super saturated and doesn't sound right to me. With these older sort of Rangemaster, I don't know if you can see it, but this is a Mullard OC44 transistor, which would have been made in Great Britain. These are old, you know, made in the early 70s. I've got a bunch of them. Red dot, black glass, they call them. I don't know if you can see the red dot at all, but anyway, these transistors are much nicer. They just have a really nice smooth clipping, and you can, on these homemade sort of Rangemaster circuits I've made, you can run the volume all the way up if you're using one of these old OC44s that has an HFE between like 80 and 100 and I don't know, 100. I think they say 80 to 100 is the recommendation, but I've experimented 80 to 120, and anything in that range seems to be a reasonable gain that allows you to run it wide open. So the next couple things, you know, I guess just to do with the tone, is Tony ran really light strings. He, even when tuned to E, I think he would run 8 to 38. With even the B string, were both a high E and B string were both run at you know, an 8, and then all the way up to 38. But he ran these both as 8s. And then when he started tuning to C sharp, I believe he started going to 9 to 42 on his gauge, which is still super slack at C sharp. I've done it a lot, and you know, it's almost integral to the tone, though. You know, I end up going up to 10 to 46 because it's just, you know, it holds tune a bit better, and it's going to be sort of less, you know, just less sloppy, I guess. But part of Tony's tone, I think, is really having those super slack strings, and you really hear it in his vibrato, sort of wobbly and eerie, and you know, it's sort of critical. And like I said, I've experimented with it throughout the years. He typically, for rhythm stuff, was running his always on the bridge pickup, you know, running it somewhere between 8 or 9 for rhythm and 10 for leads. His tone is said to have been disconnected in his guitar just because he never liked to roll tone off. He was sort of always looking for more treble, and rarely using the neck pickup. I think he said, you know, for some jazz lead type stuff, he might have used the neck pickup, but I think if you watch any of his live playing from back in the day, he's just glued to that bridge pickup and messing with that volume a lot just to get, you know, the pickups, the P90s, the old ones here, and even a new P90 is going to clean up super well as you roll off the volume. So just an entire range of tonality, especially with that treble booster, you know, is right there just at the pickup if you just roll on and off the volume. And the treble booster really only works if the amp's really cooking. That's how you're going to get the best, you know, it's going to overdrive the preamp and everything, and really push the tubes, and give you that really nice kind of full open, you know, it's not, Sabbath's sound to me in the 70s wasn't really a tight sound. It was like a big open sound with the treble booster really kicking the attack, you know. But yeah, so anyways, that's sort of trying to sort of recap what I've learned through the years, kind of messing around with this Iommi tone stuff. So anyways, you know, check out this video. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Let me know if there's anything you've learned about Tony's tone through the years that I might have missed. And you know, check out all my tone demos where I run this rig and kind of different combinations of these pedals. Appreciate it. Take it easy. See ya.